Hey, welcome back. So let's begin with the very basics of working with files, which would be to just read in the data from an existing file. Whether it's a file that contains the complete works of Shakespeare in a single file, or every word in the French dictionary, or just like a single line or two of text, a to-do list, whatever the data is, we follow the same procedure. So what we do to read in is we take advantage of the open function. So this is one of the few built-in functions we haven't covered yet. So we don't actually have to import any module. We don't have to download anything. We get access to file I/O functionality out of the box with Python. So the function we want is called open. And open, we pass in the name of a file name. At a bare minimum, we have to tell it which file. Makes sense. And it returns a file object to us. So a file it contains more than the data itself. There's information about the file, like certain permissions data about it, the type of file that it is. I believe there's also things like when it was opened or last opened. I'm not positive on all the metadata, but there's some metadata that goes along with the file. So it doesn't just give you data, it gives you an object. And then we have to explicitly read in from that object using a read method. So quickly, I'll show you here the documentation. If you just go to the very top, built-in functions, click on open, you can see that open actually has a lot of parameters here. You can pass in a bunch of arguments, but we have to pass in file. It's the only one that doesn't have a default. So file is, dictionary.txt or Alice in Wonderland story or whatever the text or whatever the file is. And as you can see, it opens a file and returns a corresponding file object. And if the file can't be opened, if there's a problem with it's corrupted or the file, you don't have permission to open it, then an error will be raised. We can give an absolute or relative path name. So in our example, I'll show you, but we'll just work in the same directory. But if your file is located somewhere else, you can reference the path to get there. So that's all I'll talk about in the docs here, but if you have questions, you can read a lot more. There are all these very tiny little parameters you can specify, like replace. So if there's malformed data, how would you like it to be replaced? Like, do you want a question mark? Do you want a sad face? What do you want to put there? Or do you just want to ignore it? Same thing with backslashes. If you have backslashes in your strings that you're importing or that you're reading in, do you want to make them Pythonized and do the double backslash? So very tiny things, really. But we're not going to really go into that. Let's just talk about the important stuff, which is opening the file and then doing something with it. So here's a really simple example. I already have this story.txt file on my computer, but imagine that this is, 50,000 lines instead of a single line. The process is the same. So we have a file, in this case story.txt, and then we have open using the built-in open function and then the name of the file. And I'm just going to hop to my terminal now, open up Python 3. First, I'll just show you the file is right here, story.txt. And now if I open up, not Python 23, not there just yet. If I do, let's just call it f equals open, and then we have to pass in the name of that. So story.txt. Okay, now if we look at what f is right now, we get this text IO wrapper object. It's an instance of the text IO wrapper class. It also, the way that it's printed out, it tells us the name of the file. Mode R means that we are reading it. And if we could do something like help F, you can read a lot more about this. If you want to learn go into detail about how it actually works, you can talk about buffers and encoding and decoding, and there's a lot of fun stuff with working with files. And yeah, we can scroll through, see all of the methods, a bunch of dunders, but then also methods we can call like close. We'll talk about that later. Read, we're going to use this one in just a moment. Read at most n characters from stream. So we'll talk about that. If we print the file right now, it's the file object. To actually get the data in there, even though it's just a silly little string, we need to use read, which I just showed you in help was a method. So it's f.read. And I don't know if you saw that in help, but if I don't specify a number in here, it's going to specify -1, which will just give me the entire file. So we get this short story is really short. Notice there's the new line character because in the file itself, if I could show you the file, I have a new line afterwards. So there we go. We've successfully read in a file. And if we wanted to do it again, f.read. Oh no, what's happening? What is going on? Why can't we read it again? So we read it once and it worked just fine, and then I read it again and now it's an empty string. What the heck, Python? What are you doing? Well, let's go back to our slides. We need to talk about cursors in order to understand what's going on. When Python reads a file, it uses what's known as a cursor. You can think of a cursor like what you see when you're typing, right? When I go back to my text file here, if I had a bunch of lines in here, my cursor is here. This is like the place that I am in the text, and I can progress through it and move down, and you've seen a cursor before. It's the same sort of idea in Python. So after a file is read, which we did the first time with f.read, the cursor goes to the end of the file. So if we try to read from there, there's nothing left to read, so we get that empty string. So it's a bit of a cliffhanger, but I'll show you how to fix that in the next video. We'll go into more detail with cursors.